Hi, I'm Reshma McClintock. I am one of the founders of FP365, and I'd like to welcome you to 365 Live. The purpose of 365 Live is to highlight global activists and thought leaders working towards social change within and beyond the adoption community. So today I would like to welcome Blake Gibbons. Blake Gibbons is an adoptee rights educator and creator of the YouTube series Not Your Orphan, a channel dedicated to child welfare reform through the art of visual storytelling. Blake has a bachelor's in peace and conflict studies and is working toward a master's in adoption history. He is basically the coolest person ever. And at FP365, we absolutely love him. So welcome, Blake.
Thank you so much for having me. I really
Oh,
appreciate the time and opportunity.
oh, we're so excited to hear from you today. And we just love what you're doing, which is
Mhm.
one of the reasons we wanted to feature you on 365 Live. So we will dive right in. The purpose here is to just really um, do a power post and get as much information about your show out there and the work that you're doing. So I just have a few questions for you. And we will start with asking you to briefly explain about your work, about your show, and all of the things that you are doing.
Okay, so Not Your Orphan is a channel on YouTube. It's a platform I started my first semester of graduate school and had probably been gestating with since my undergrad. Um, the way I got into it wasn't exactly poetic. It was just kind of I there's a reason that a lot of adoptees use the term coming out of the fog. It just sort of hits you in a way at a point in life where there's not a lot of explaining, here's the linear fashion that I got to this point. It just gives you no other option. You see something different, and that's the way that internalized depression works. You wake up, or you don't. Uh, but yeah, I decided, I guess, when I started creating videos that I had a story inside of me that I was tired of just letting sit there and kind of go sour. And I was scared of what that would look like years from now if I continued to live that way. And when I did my undergrad, there was a lot of emphasis on in peace and conflict studies. There was a lot of emphasis on studying world leaders around movements and in different aspects of life. But there was an emphasis on storytelling that was kind of this thread that was coming through, and hearing all these people like Dr. Maya Angelou talk about, having an untold story as being painful. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, you're right, it is. But never thinking like, oh, I have an untold story. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question because I'm not even sure how I got to it. It just kind of happened.
Oh, it does. I love that. And I think that so you're an adoptee, a domestic adoptee, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Texan born.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you sort of personally started coming out of the fog, and then that led you to this place where you felt like you needed to share that you had this kind of burning desire, is what it sounds like. But
Yeah,
although it sounds like it was a slow burn, is that right?
it was because and if people go to the Not Your Orphan channel, they'll see I put out a recent video that begins to, I can't say it does talk about it because I think it's such an ongoing conversation, but begins to talk about where whiteness and privilege and fragility and trauma all intersect. Um, I'm a white adoptee that was adopted by a white family in a small rural Iowa community. There was every option to never ever talk about this. And privilege offers certain people some comforts so long as they are very uncritical about their environment and their world. And I took that path not only because of those things and not thinking that there was other things to look at, but also a lot of adoptees, regardless of identity or their privileges, I think it's dependent on what age you were adopted, but have this sense of responsibility to be emotional caregivers to their adopted parents, whatever you want to call them. And I did as well. And so while I couldn't run from the way that adoption had affected me, um, I poured it into other things. I didn't know that I was allowed to evaluate how it affected me. And so there was finally a time after I'd first left school and I went back to undergrad that I was helping a veteran with his organization. And we went to a day long symposium on trauma. And that was with Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you know his work or not. Really cool person. He looks like some like mystical crow man. And it's hard
Oh,
to
then I'm in.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to hide from his intense energy, but he knows what he's talking about, and I thought I was going there to better understand the PTSD of the veteran community I was working with, and also of, s topics like intergenerational trauma and how that was affecting the Native communities that I wanted to start working with or helping. um, Before I realized, oh, my wanting to help other people that are in pain is really from unaddressed things in myself. And what happened at that conference, there's like 300, 400 people there. Um, he asked the audience, was there anybody there with a history of symptoms of trauma, possibly in childhood, that didn't have like a frame of reference for those? I, like, have this out of body experience. I'm, like, sitting down still in my mind and nothing's happening, but I just, like, am watching my hand float up into the air. I'm like, "Oh, no." So he just darts over to me and gets somebody to give me the microphone, and I'm like, "What have I done?" And, we're talking and talking and talking, and he just cannot get me to give him anything to get the conversation going. I'm like, "I don't know, this kinda happened when I was young, and this kinda happened." And in reality, I could checklist nearly everything on national lists of, like, childhood trauma and symptoms, but we weren't getting to any sense of story, and before he was about to turn over the conversation to someone else because he was kinda just tired, like, "We're not getting anywhere with this kid," almost like an afterthought, I said, "Well, I'm adopted." I just grabbed the mic, I said, "Well, I'm adopted." And he stared at me, and everyone was looking, and he said, "How is that not a trauma?" And I was frozen. I was totally frozen. Everything I'd never wanted to face was coming up. Everything I'd been told not to face was coming up. My immediate thoughts are like, "Where's mom? Like, don't talk. Mom's watching." And he began talking about being separated even just a couple months from his mom during the Holocaust. He's an older gentleman, was an infant at that time, and how that's impacted him in his life and his psychology and his neuro networking. Um, and at the very end, one of the last things he said to me was, "You've earned your pain." And I have goosebumps now. I broke
Good.
down in the biggest tears I have ever cried in front of over 300 strangers. I was nearly inconsolable. Like, makes me wanna cry now thinking about it. But I realized, and people kind of raise their eyebrows at that story, it's like, "Well, was he feeding you?" And then you were like, "Well, because someone's saying it's a trauma, then you'd" not at all. I had all the symptoms, but I didn't have a story because I didn't have anybody giving me permission to have that story. And so that was towards the end of my undergrad, and that was probably 3 years ago now, and yeah, I had maybe, like, a little bit of a relapse, and I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna face any of this, you can't make me." And then in my thesis semester, I don't even remember how it began, I just started looking into adoption history, and I was like, "How has no one who's talking about this stuff?" And the rest is history. I hope to never let it go and always be passing the mic around to we adoptees because it is quite the interesting oppression. That was the long-winded answer.
It was so good,
Okay.
and I'm over here trying to keep it together.
Okay.
Um, Whew, thank you for sharing that. And I kind of had that moment with you when you said, he said, "How is that not a trauma?" It just, my whole body, because I really relate to that. So thank you for being vulnerable to share that with us. You actually answered the next question in that, which is perfect, which was, what was your inspiration? And I love that you essentially had this untold story in you and felt like you had to do it. And that you're taking that the next step, though, not only to heal yourself, but also to build community and share things and educate. And it's one of the things I love about your show is it is so educational. It's so brief and concise, and just you pack so much information in there. And I love that. So I want to know, is there a way for other people to get involved with some of what you're doing? What kind of ways can people support you and your work? I know it can be a really lonely road. There's also a lot of people kind of cheerleading you. Also, I know a lot of people love what you're doing and are championing your cause. How can people help you? How can people get involved? What are those kind of next steps?
It's interesting because hearing you speak, there was something you said that made my mind picture almost like all of we in the adoptee rights movement. our work is like a reunion together in a way. It's
Mm.
like not only do we have that a lot of us go on that search for birth families, some don't, but wanting to get back or form something. I'm like picturing this kind of thing. And that's a lot of what's happening out there. It's not necessarily that I'm doing anything too different from everybody else. Everybody has their own different way of doing it though, and it's like we're all on that path, like, okay, make the story more cohesive, more cohesive, and
Yeah.
that and that's how movements form, you know.
Mhm.
I'm lucky enough to have never heard any adoptees go like, I already did that first, or like, oh, so and so already said. It's just like, yeah, keep going, more voices, more audience. So I just wanted to honor that. That's cool. I hadn't felt that before or thought about it that way before,
I
but
love that because we feel that same way. There is space for everyone. I don't think there
yeah.
can be enough websites. I don't think there can be enough, interviews or faces out there of adopted people sharing because the narrative has been dominated for so long by people who are not adopted. And we have to really essentially, unfortunately, reclaim that. And that's what we're doing. I love that picture that you gave of us kind of coming together and reclaiming that as a group is just, I mean, that is beautiful and powerful.
Yeah, reunion, restoration, that sort of image. And it's because adoption doesn't discriminate. It can affect absolutely anybody.
Yeah.
Especially infantile adoption, you can't tell what that little being is going to be. They're anybody, you know? So it's important, yeah, that as many voices all over the world are speaking as possible. That does not answer your question though, which was how can people get connected? Well, right now it's such a new platform. I think what you're doing right now for me is doing that. I just visibility is important. Um, it has its own unique flavors that I think people who are meant to hear it will hear it, and so I hope that they enjoy the work. It's very exhausting. Um, but I think it helps. I think it helps maybe to talk in terms of future. I have a hope that Not Your Orphan becomes a 501(c)(3) at some point. And the kinds of things that I would love to do, the first thing, this fall, I plan to fundraise so that I can go on a tour of the US. Because the biggest central thing that I want to get across in my platform is history, but history through art and storytelling. And so, yeah, I want to interview amazing people like yourself that are doing cool things out in the world, but I also want to stop by and show people and get people in a really visceral, sensual experience of adoption history in the West.
Mhm.
Um, it's poetic, it's traumatic, it's I don't know, in the dearth of having a Netflix docuseries for ourselves, I wanna just create what I'm not seeing, and, so people can sort of get on board with the channel and know if they subscribe that that's something that's gonna be coming up in the future. Um, I am looking for this is a really specific thing. I am looking for any adoptees out there who are choreographers, um, film directors who are better than myself with a camera in my bedroom, musicians, singers, dancers. There is an arts project that I want to do, and I don't want to share too much about it. That would involve possibly a weekend of people getting together from across the US and doing something for this November, hopefully. And if not, I'm going for next November because for those who don't know, November is National Adoption Awareness Month. And I want to start that month off with a bang that reclaims our time and our voice at the very beginning. I don't want to say much more, but if anybody is connected with those and knows of anybody who would be interested in sort of a dance visual arts project, get in touch. My email's nyovids, plural, at gmail.com, and you can reach out there or through my Facebook page. I'm very open.
Perfect. That is so good. Well, I do a mean Running Man, so I'll go ahead and throw my name in the hat now.
Perfect.
No, I'm kidding. Um,
Perfect.
not my thing, not dancing,
No,
but
it's
I'm
okay.
super excited about that, and I don't want you to share more because I want you to, be able to get the people you need and kind of
Yeah.
surprise us. I love that idea, and I think that's really exciting. So, I'm so excited about what you're doing. I so appreciate your work. My co-founder, Stephanie May Stats, and I, as I told you before, are really big fans, and, your show is so brilliant. I just think it is brilliant. And I personally have learned so much from you. And I hope that a lot of people will check you out on Facebook and Instagram and connect with you that way. We'll also put your website and your email and that kind of information up for people to get as well. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you everyone for watching. We will have more 365 Live coming your way soon with more world changers and a lot of people who are doing really great things. So thank you so much, Blake. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.